Hi, Founder fans. Jason here, and today's founder is Esek Hopkins, the one and only Commodore of the Continental Navy. Now, by the time the Revolutionary War breaks out, Esek Hopkins had already served around the world as a successful ship captain, and he had also helped his brother Stephen Hopkins when the latter was governor of Rhode Island on several occasions. And side note, Stephen Hopkins would later sign the Declaration of Independence while Esek was at sea. Before we get to the fun stuff about being a ship captain, however, we need to take a side note. At one point in his life, in 1765, Essex attempted to become a slave trader. This sad truth is even more hard to bear when we learn about how his adventure went. There's a reason he only did it once, and it's because as good as a ship captain as he was, as good as a merchant as he was for other products, when it came to trading enslaved persons, he was particularly bad at it. Not because he was cruel, but because he was bad at it. And in fact, he only sailed from Rhode Island down to the Caribbean, and over 100 of the 165 enslaved persons on his ship had passed away on the trip, and the rest were in extremely poor health. Fortunately, for a variety of reasons, he does not continue in this particular profession. And actually, his trip is so bad that if there is a silver lining to be found, it's that many people in Rhode Island saw what happened and began to move towards abolition. Again, this is in 1865. It's a decade before the Revolutionary War. And this is one of the turning points that actually puts Rhode Island, and to a lesser degree the rest of New England, on the course to manumitting any enslaved persons. It would take a long time. It was a long, hard road, but it's an important part of Essex's life and journey that really needs to be discussed. Now, I don't want to just brush that aside, but I do want to get through the rest of the story here. And so moving along, Esek Hopkins, his reputation was still untarnished by any of this because that was how the times were. And in 1775, once the Revolutionary War breaks out, Esek Hopkins is commissioned by Rhode Island as a brigadier general in the militia and takes control of the entirety of Rhode Island's troops within the state. Now, this only lasts for a few months because, well, the Continental Congress decides to create a navy. And although there are several candidates floated to become the first Commodore, including John Paul Jones, John Adams got his way, and Esek Hopkins was named as the first Commodore of the Continental Navy. Now, he was given 8 ships, and he was instructed to go sail from Philadelphia down to the Chesapeake. He needed to look at the British Navy that had many ships stationed in the Chesapeake, and if he could, attack it. After that, Hopkins could do whatever he saw fit to help the American cause. So Hopkins takes his ships and he sails down the Chesapeake, and he looks. And he says, yeah, that's the British Navy, all right. Me and my 8 ships that just got changed from merchant vessels to warships are not equipped to fight them. And if we do engage with the British and lose, then we lose the Continental Navy right away in its first battle. So Hopkins made the decision that historically we look back on it as the right decision now, though at the time his contemporaries didn't, and we will get to that. But he made the decision not to engage the British and instead sailed to the Caribbean. He sailed to Nassau, what they then called New Providence, but we now call the island of Nassau, where the British owned that, but it was lightly guarded. And he attacked it. And actually, Hopkins landed Marines on Nassau. And this is the first time in the history of the world that Americans landed Marines on a foreign soil. They take a bunch of ammunition and stores and other things that were really needed by George Washington and the Continental Army, and they leave. And they sail back up to Rhode Island, where they want to unload the stuff and get it to the Continental Army. Now, as they're passing Long Island on their way to Rhode Island, they meet up with a handful more British ships, and Hopkins this time engages the British Navy and takes 2 vessels successfully. Now, the biggest ship, the prize, which was called the Glasgow, does get away, but Hopkins gets even more stuff for the Americans. He then pulls into Rhode Island and unloads the stuff and sends it over, and almost immediately is called to the table by the Continental Congress. They are not happy with him. They actually are really unhappy because when he first left and he went to the Chesapeake Bay to see what was going on with the British, they wanted him to attack the British. Now, again, he was defended by John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, and many other people. But the Continental Congress was a governing body, and there were party politics going on. And mostly he was criticized because of these party politics. And in fact, Hopkins was censured by the Continental Congress because he didn't attack the British in the Chesapeake and he let the Glasgow get away. Unfortunately, he's also kind of trapped there because now the British Navy are hanging around. So he is trapped in the port, and he spends a year and a half in the port just kind of sitting around. During this time, many of his officers actually disobey their orders to go to Philadelphia and complain more about him. As you'll learn, people complained much about their superiors behind their backs during this time. Mostly the British officers, but the Americans did it too. Hopkins, unfortunately, with his reputation tarnished, many of his men didn't respect him. In fact, I've seen arguments that it would have been better if the Continental Congress just took away his command and kind of fired him instead of just giving him a censure, because they could at least have someone in charge who the people had respect for. And as I said, although he had respect in Rhode Island, and he would later continue to serve in the Rhode Island State Assembly, Hopkins had lost the respect of many of his men because of the censure. Now, a year and a half goes by, and then Hopkins finally is fired, essentially. He hands in his resignation, but he's told he needs to hand in his resignation. Interestingly, no one replaces him. It seems like the Continental Congress kind of gets the idea that, well, John Paul Jones, who was originally considered for the same job as Hopkins, Gustavus Cunningham, Lambert Wicks, they're all just kind of out at sea capturing British ships and doing a great job, but no one's in charge because they're out in the ocean and you can't get a message to them. And they just kind of decide not to have another Commodore. That being said, Esek Hopkins is therefore the one and only Commodore of the Continental Army. It's a brief overview of the life of Hopkins, but he's a really fascinating character from an important family on Rhode Island, and I sure like talking about him. I hope you enjoyed hearing about him. If you did, do me a favor and hit like. And if you're new here, subscribe. I put up videos about the American Revolution 7 days a week. I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.